This occasion. Thank you very much on behalf of Project 90 for taking your time out to come and join us for another seminar on the Unpacking the Sustainability Doughnut series. Just a little bit about the Sustainability Doughnut for those who might not know, sorry. It was developed in, I think, 2011 by the Johan Rockstrom and Rachel Raworth. I'm not sure how to pronounce the surname actually. I think it's Raworth or Rayworth. But in any case, it looks at the 9 planetary boundaries, climate boundaries, and then also looking at the social foundations, some of the social foundations, food, health, education, and some others. And then it looks at a safe and just space where society then should at least be working towards getting to. Project 90 is hosting these series of seminars where we unpack the developments around the Sustainable Development Goals within the context of the Doughnut of sustainability in order to raise awareness about both the importance of COP21 but also the importance of the post-2015 development agenda. So before I begin, I just would like to show you guys a video specifically looking at the theme of today's series, which is freshwater use, but we're going to be having a look at the food and energy water nexus video, which was compiled by WWF, I think last year sometime. Right.
Food, energy, water. These basic necessities impact each other in countless ways. Right now, more than half of South Africa's population doesn't have enough food, and our population is growing. By 2030, there will be close on 60 million mouths to feed, but producing food takes water. A nectarine, 33 liters of water. A liter of milk, 1,000 liters. Already, more than 2/3 of our water is used to water crops, and 98% of our water is allocated for specific use. We need to produce more food with less water. If we are going to produce more food to feed more people, we are going to need to think differently about how we manage our water. Producing, packaging, transporting, and storing food all takes energy. South Africa has an energy crisis. Our demand exceeds our supply. The bulk of our electricity is produced through the mining and burning of fossil fuels, which pollutes our water resources and contributes to a changing climate, both of which impact on crop production. We need clean, sustainable energy sources. If we're going to produce more food to feed more people, we are going to need to think differently about how we produce energy. The energy and the water lost in the food we waste each year is enough to power the city of Johannesburg for 20 years and fill 600,000 Olympic swimming pools. Food, energy, water. For smart, sustainable planning, we need to recognize the way these 3 resources are interconnected. Each one affects the others, but we need a steady supply of all 3 to support a growing population. To be a great nation, we need to think differently.
Right, and that's the entire video. So getting into today's topic, it's no secret then that South Africa is a water scarce country. And equally so, it's no secret that we're currently going through a water crisis. 4 of the 5 provinces in this country are experiencing drought-like symptoms or drought-like conditions, if one can say. We've got issues in Johannesburg, for example, of AMD seeping into community water. KZN has only started experiencing rain, I think, last week for the first time in a few months. So the water crisis that we're experiencing seems to be here today, and for me at least, it makes it a pertinent conversation to have for this presentation today. So very much, the only thing I would like to ask of the participants today is that in listening to Fadiel's presentation that we think differently, as the video says. As much as we need water, we understand that as a country we need to develop and move forward. However, the ways in which we do that is very much dependent on our water supplies. And as evident today, there isn't enough water for everyone. So how is it that we're going to be able to manage this? Our speaker today is Fadiel Ahjum from the UCT's Energy Research Center. Ahjum joined the Energy Systems Analysis and Planning Group back in 2013. He is currently engaged in energy water research utilizing the Times modeling platform and contributes to the group's annual continuing professional development energy systems model course. Other activities that he's been involved in include ongoing refinement of the ERC South African Times or SATIM model, in particular the synfuels and industrial subsectors. I would like to hand over to Fadiel now. That is enough for me, I think.
Hello everyone, it's Fadiel. As Tanya said, I'm from the Energy Research Center. I was coached out of the office. I don't do this so often, so allow me to bear with me with my rambling. So I'm here to talk about the work that we've been engaged with for the past year and a bit. It's actually work that was sponsored by the World Bank's First Energy Program. So it's a kind of rickety model, as it's the first run, called the Model T. So I'll present it in all its flaws, and it speaks to kind of integrating water into the current energy representation of the systems model that we have. Most of the work was done by myself and Bruno Mervin, but there are many other brains that actually sits behind this particular project. I'll just bring up the next slide first of all. So the idea is that in this particular iteration, we simply looked at kind of energy supply and its water needs, and the idea is then to, in the next iterative phases, to the non-energy sectors as well, and do a kind of much more deeper analysis, like a bottom-up, if you like, looking kind of at the residential sectors where the water energy nexus interacts there and how that feeds up into the chains. At the moment, we've kind of taken a top-down approach, kind of looking at strategic national planning and the kind of crucial energy supply sectors, mostly electricity, some refineries, etc. I'll get deeper into the model, but that's kind of where we are at the moment. And if I'm not very clear, just please stop me for clarification. So, to start off with, I guess we need a kind of common reference point as to when we talk about water scarcity. There's Peter White, an Australian, who did some work on this, and he's kind of basically categorized what we tend to mean by water scarcity from the very basic definition of availability of fresh water resources all the way right down. I think in South Africa, for example, we're down here where you're looking at the country's both its economic capacity to develop water resources, but also the institutions, and by that I mean the people as well, that have an adaptive capacity. So you're looking at, let's say, institutions, your management of your water basins, your water resources, the educational programs that kind of encourage people to conserve water as well. And of course the economic, the actual ability to actually build the pipelines, the dams, etc., the desalination plants, treating degraded water sources. So all these contribute to, I guess, a water poverty index rather than the water scarcity. So you might have the issue of water availability, the reliability, and these all kind of meld together into a kind of a definition of what we mean by available water. So at the moment, let's go back. Yeah, so in the South African context, I think we're somewhere here in between. When I say in between, that's because we still have issues about addressing the, I guess, at the municipal level, our water losses. So even though we plan for future water needs, we still lose about, I think, close to 40% of potable water supply through leaky pipes. So just briefly, just to kind of contextualize what it is we're up to, I guess we speak of water, energy, food, land, the nexus of that. Let me just stand this way so it's easy to see. You can see, for example, so we have the energy supply system, but there's not just the energy, there are also the other dimensions. There's climate, there's land, there's water, so I'll be focusing on water. So the blue lines basically just represent the water supply that goes into the energy system, which are all the kind of red arrows, and these are just the kind of links there. So I'll just get into this. You'll see, it's very simple in the sense that you've got your power plants, there's water for cooling, boilers as well, and it speaks to different types of water qualities as well. So your boilers are basically utilized to create steam. You spin these turbines to generate the electricity. Steam requirements have different requirements to cooling systems. There's additional energy involved that goes into that, making sure the water is of particular high purity. It's particularly important because most of our power plants are migrating to dry cooled plants, so there's less reliance on cooling water and much more reliance on higher grade water. So the implication for that is the prevailing quality of bulk water, for example. So your degraded water sources requires a much more intense treatment and they have high energy. So if we expand down to the system, you can see, for example, energy supply related, so it's the energy for water scenario again, where you've got your, so I can speak on the municipal level, for example, there's all the electricity that goes into pumping water from the dam. So if you look at the Western Cape, for example, we're taking water from Full Flow Dam up in the north. It's about a pipeline that's about 100 meters, 1.2 meters big. That's a lot of water that gets pumped down to the city. I think that's where most of the city's electricity water goes into as well. There's also the electricity that goes into treating the water treatment plants. So it's mostly for pumping, but the idea is that you can see where these kind of connections go into. You turn your tap on, there's water at the end of it, but it's quite complicated engineering system that actually requires transfers of water. And in South Africa, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, I'll save that for later. Just quickly brought up here, speaking to the converter, I suppose. We all kind of know what the situation is at the moment. Most of our energy is coming from coal. Most of it goes into electricity supply, and about 30% of it goes into our domestic liquid fuels production, the coals to liquids. We know that South Africa is also trying to be a player in terms of meeting international obligations towards CO2 emissions. So most of the mitigation potential would be in the power sector, because about 60% of our emissions are coming from coal. Speaks to most of our primary energy comes from coal, so that's where most of our emissions lie, and about 10% of it are actually coming from Secunda, the liquid fuels facility. Also, in terms of local concerns, we're looking at kind of becoming more energy secure. So there's the big debate about nuclear versus renewables, and also, of course, the exploitation of shale gas, which is about this region here. So you can see most of the coal plants are sitting there. We've got some. These are gas plants and potential renewable energy plays up in the north, where it's relatively water scarce, although the results from our modeling is a bit contentious. And of course we've got shale gas here with implications from groundwater usage. So without further ado, I'll just get straight into it. If I'm speaking too fast, just let me know. Okay, so what's happening at the moment on a national level? Water planning, water and energy planning in South Africa. So, back this way. Currently, these two, they kind of operate in separate spheres. We have the Department of Water and Sanitation. They do some very intricate and sophisticated work, modeling at a regional level, but it's kind of at a disjuncture to what happens at the DOE. So they do their planning, DWS does their planning, and there's not necessarily a complete synchronization of their work, in the sense that some water might be not necessarily properly accounted for, vice versa, and also the fact that they use different assumptions of regional development as well. So when you plan from a top down, you tend to skew these sort of regional nuances, which the DWS takes into account. So what we're trying to do, I guess, is trying to harmonize this, which is, I guess, what the water energy integrated assessment speaks to. Okay, so where are we in a practical sense? We know 90% of our population have access to electricity. I guess it's somewhat debatable in terms of pricing. I mentioned earlier on that we've been using dry cool plants as well. That was early on issues related to kind of water security concerns in the old apartheid days, much like that energy security concerns, which is why they built CTL and GTL facilities. Because most of our water comes from Lesotho. Also, Eskom does practice what they call zero liquid effluent discharge, which basically means the water that they withdraw, because for all their plants are inland, they're required not to actually produce any effluent as such. So they basically just recycle the water at the site through cascading cycles, and they eventually just dump the what's left of it in their ash dams. So all the coal that gets burnt is ash at the end of it that gets transported by these conveyor belts to these great big ash dams, and they just use the water as a kind of binder, the brine I should say. So all it goes through multiple stage cycles, it goes to cooling water first, and it gets recycled through other particular uses, and then it gets dumped into these ash dams. So there's no actual effluent discharge as such. So about 30% of our units are currently dry cool, a bit more when Dupi and Kusili comes online, probably much more to that, half of it, if you like. Where are we in terms of water? This is data that comes from the National Water Resources Strategy. It's a bit old. We need to actually reassess our water balances to see if they're still plausible. But basically most of our water, I think it was mentioned in the previous video as well, the time to present it, most of our water is going to irrigation, food production, so domestic use, and I guess mining and electricity, you could say about 5% if you include coal mining for that. These areas here tend to be, were highlighted as water stress, which is kind of where our coal regions are, where our electricity production occurs, because most of our water is actually occurring kind of the high elevation areas, which is the Drakensberg mountains up this way. Drakensberg, that's where all our water is coming from, Lesotho of course. So, what does it actually mean when we're talking about energy and water? So, and I get back to what I was saying earlier on about being water scarce in that sense. So, Lesotho is a water-rich country. It sells water to South Africa, and that's where it sustains most of our economic activity as well. So, in terms of water scarcity, I mean, the water's there, and engineering can actually provide the water at a cost. But what does that actually mean for South Africa? Currently, the country is already dependent on vast interbasic transfers. And then these arrows here are just kind of indicating where water gets moved around. It's a Vaal dam, by the way, and that's where the Dupi is currently, and that's where they think we'll be building a lot more coal power plants. This is the Botswana border, as you can see, but that's where the Dupi is, and this little that Bokolo catchment, and this proposed pipeline is actually to transfer water up from the Vaal eventually, if this becomes the next big energy hub to build coal. In fact, it'll be coming from Lesotho as well. So the engineering actually mitigates water shortages, but at cost. And we don't necessarily capture the true cost in that sense, it's the economic cost, but whether we include the externalities, and that would be a policy-driven debate to actually look at what are these you're doing to the environment when you're actually moving this water around, because you don't really account for, I mean, one of the issues, and I'm thinking a specific example is in Western Cape, we've got the Refice and the Berg scheme, where we actually link up two different basins, the Berg River and the Refice and if you've been to Franschhoek, you've got Theewaterskloof Dam and the Berg River, the Bergrivier Dam, and they're actually linked by a tunnel system, but the two systems they provide water of very different quality, And I remember seeing a picture of water being released for irrigators from because what they do is they take excess winter water and they pump it from the Berg River, and they pump it into Theobitis Kloof, and they release it again in summer months. And you can actually see the turbidity of the water from the Theobitis Kloof actually impacts the ecology, the marine ecology of the Berg River. So they've actually had to build another pipeline to actually release that water further down the line. But you're still basically interfering with the aquatic system by doing that. And we don't account for that cost. That's the thing I was referring to early on. How does one then incorporate these environmental impacts into your modeling, which is something that we still need to address, because everything has ramifications. So, this is just a kind of further explanation or detail to what I was referring to early on. So you go from this one there, the city engineering, moving water around. So if you look at this area, just this little area there, where our coal plants and so that's this area. This is what we've done to support our electricity production. So you can see these are the basins that are affected. This is most of the country, and these are all this little red icons. So these are all the power stations. These dashed lines are the actual water basins. So you can see the immense water supply network, heavily reliant on electricity to move water around. And of course, all these water users, they compete with each other. So it's not just it's the power sector, but there's also irrigators and domestic users, which means that require water as well. So what we try to do is somehow try to incorporate this, but on a national scale, to present this hopefully to policymakers to see what the trade-offs that need to be considered when planning an energy supply system. Currently, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the energy modeling that we do. So Thunder's mentioned the South African Times model. So all it is it's a kind of a national representation of the South African energy economy. Times is just it's a modeling platform that optimizes least cost. So we've actually built up, this is a supply sector model. So you just got your generation, your transmission, and your demand. So with each one of these demands are the economic sectors. We have a very detailed residential sector, for example, somewhat detailed commercial and transport sector. Industries watching some work needs some work. So we look at demands from a kind of bottom-up perspective. So you look at your household incomes, for example, middle to low income, what sort of technologies that they would employ, so hot water heaters versus electric heaters, etc., and the alternatives that they can actually choose from that. And because time does everything on costs, when you project forward, it tries to optimize based on income, whether, for example, households would migrate to solar hot water systems if it's viable in that sense, and if there's economic incentives, you can incorporate these as long as you somewhat attracted a price to it. And then from that, you kind of get a national level demand for electricity by sector, and that feeds up the chain, and then these power plants are then dispatched to produce to cater for the demand. So, and what we did initially, we had a very crude, this is based on ESCOM data. So this is as a kind of a schematic of a power station representation in the model, and we just had a very crude linkage, a very generic national intensity figure. So that basically just all the plants were producing or consuming water at a particular generic rate, which is given from ESCOM. We also had an environmental levy, which is the ESCOM, I think it's 2 cents per kilowatt hour for fossil fuel usage, and that funds its DSM projects. So what we've tried to do then is take this kind of single, move this way. This is probably too wordy, I suppose. I'll just try and sum it up. What we try to do is look at the water demands of the energy sector, and then also trying to create a regionalized model of these South African national system. Because at the moment we just have this national system with all these demands, how plant, which are kind of very generic. There's no regional disparity between that. And the water, when you speak of water, you automatically, you have to think regionally, because it's not that substitutable as other commodities are. And also there's this regional variability that one needs to account for. So you can't work on a kind of lumping scale that you tend to do when you do energy modeling, like with the DOE, for example, as well. So, and when you start looking at water for particular needs, you also have to look at the types of quality that you need it for. So at the moment we only have what we call primary water and high quality water. So with respect to the energy system, high quality water would be, I mentioned earlier, like water for boilers to generate the steam. The CTL, the coal to liquids facility, also uses a lot of steam for its particular process, the Fischer-Tropsch process. So it's basically just how it splits up coal and it reacts with the gasified coal to produce these synthetic fuels, but it needs a lot of it. And so it's highly dependent on a very high grade of water. Whereas most of the primary treated water is going to typically be your wet cool plants, the existing wet cool plants, and the cooling systems, the cooling towers you probably see a lot of, and also I guess domestic and irrigation use as well. Specific. So I mentioned all this before. We took our model, we split it up. We've got technologies which we've now split up into regions, and this is kind of similar. We don't really need to know that. That's just how the scheme costs. These are just the individual schemes, water supply schemes that are required to cater for future demand. So you have the cost of building a dam, the fixed costs that go with that, and this is like the electricity that actually is required as well. It makes more sense if I show you the next slide actually. Well, the slide after the next slide. So. Yeah, so what we did was, when we actually looking at the country, now we can actually split up the country into these regions. We thought, well, okay, where are the future energy plays likely to be? And so we thought, okay, so we know that that's coal, that's existing coal, right? That's new coal I alluded to earlier on, with Dupi. That's the Waterberg, where most of the mining activity is occurring, open cast. Potentially biofuels are this way, sugarcane, or biodiesel as well, very recently. We've got shale gas plays. I mean, shale gas could be, if you look at the actual literature, you can find shale gas plays all across the Peru Basin and stretches across this area. But I think most likely, most of the activity is occurring in this region here due to the earlier drilling exploration activity. And then of course we've got renewable energy beyond the distributed energy of solar PV, where you've got your kind of baseload CSP, the Uppington area, which would feed off the Orange River, the Senku Orange River, which comes from Lesotho. So what we did was to kind of simplify things for ourselves. We've just basically split our national single region model into these different areas. This is actually a Richards Bay, so it's not really biofuels. All we've done with Richards Bay is said, well, if you can't take the current paradigm for coal power plants is to build a plant next to the mine. It's cheaper, so they call them run of mine. You basically build a power plant on the mine. You've got the conveyor belt system. The idea is, well, there's no water. How about taking the coal to the water? So you have these like seaboard, if you like, coal plants, and you ship them down to Richards Bay. So you have existing infrastructure because this is the main export terminal. So you ship the coal down to the power plants in the case of water, extreme water scarcity. But it'd be very expensive to build these power plants there because of the transmission cost, and also the fact that you're using high-grade coal there, because this is export-grade coal. It gets washed, and it's very, so you'd be paying a premium basically for this option, and it never actually features in the model. It speaks to the rationality of doing such a thing. What this is, it's just kind of a schematic of what I was rambling on about earlier. It's just kind of how the model works. So I was talking about the regional, splitting up the model into kind of different regions. So I've just given you a kind of quick overview of, this is the region A, which was this one there. We just have a basic water supply system. So all your water demanding activities are on your right-hand side. We have, and these are the non-energy sectors. So you've got residential, irrigation, industrial, and they also compete for water. And then because we're focusing on the energy supply, we kind of looking at the individual technologies that might sit in that particular region. So you've got new coal, this is existing, it's Matimba, and then you've got refineries potentially, new Sasol built up north. And also we've decided to look at the play between dry and wet cool in terms of water demand. So I mean, Eskom said they're building dry cool, obviously. Well, let's see what happens if you add the option of building wet cool. It's economically viable based on water. So what the model does, and I've basically alluded to in terms of quality, is you have your demand and your supply commodities, right? So these are your bulk water. These are your schemes. You have the existing, that's the Makola Dam, and then you have the, so you have all these DWS projects, which are, some of them have already been planned and others are just kind of touted for future growth. So there's been a study, up in the earlier slide, marginal cost of water for future supplies. The the DWS, there used to be the DWA. The DWS, they did a study that looked at water demand. So it was a fairly crude study, projecting out to 2050. And then they just looked at what sort of water supply systems you'd require to plan ahead to that extent. I mean, they included, like, pumping desalinated water inland as the kind of ultimate water supply system, which is crazy when you look at the numbers, but they just thought, well, that will be our backstop, if you like. So we took those numbers, as Oregon actually provided the water resources analysis for us. So we took those numbers and we plugged them into these individual schemes, and what the model does is, as you can see, it attempts to incorporate the integrated nature of our water supply system as well. So as water transfers from the Sutu and from the valve that I was referring to earlier on would come into this particular scheme as a transfer from the valve. So you're taking water from Gauteng and you're taking it up north to Limpopo, which is this representation there. We have that water transformation I was referring to earlier on, where you take low-grade water and you treat it to high-grade for boilers. And these are the supply demand points. So you take your low-grade water and it gets transformed into high-grade, or if it doesn't need that high-grade, like in irrigation, for example, you can just take water straight out of your bulk water supply system and it goes into your sectors for which that water quality is suitable. Okay, I think that's about it. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is in terms of the water energy nexus, figures, you'll see that some of these schemes also require electricity as well. So there's an electricity cost to actually utilizing this water. These are like the pump stations for moving water around, and this would be electricity for treating the water with your desalination plants. There's a much more detailed schematic which I don't show because it's too messy to actually display on one screen, but there's also, like in Peru, there's also diesel as well for truck transport of water. So when you're looking at shale gas, initially you'd want to actually be transporting, because there's no existing infrastructure, you transport onto a fire truck, and that uses diesel. So the model does have that kind of feedback where your refineries would produce diesel and that would feed back into the loop, like electricity. So all this electricity that you see here is actually coming from this end here. These power plants, they are producing electricity and that feeds back into the sand through the distribution network. Likewise, CTL to produce diesel, and we have crude refineries as well. And that would feed back into another water supply system. We have about 6 of these blocks producing diesel, and that would link up to a diesel consuming, like a truck. So these blocks are somewhat interconnected. This is just one linking. So this is actually coming from region C. There's another block like this, and that links up. So there's that competing water by different regions. So we took the water demands from the Oregon study, and this is kind of one of our bigger problems in the model at the moment. So I'll get to that in a minute. These are the kind of projected demands for water in these particular regions, right? This is like the Vaal, mostly Gauteng, it's the Olifants, and it's also mostly where the power plants are. the Orange River, which is mostly irrigation and potentially CSP. And this is the Waterberg or the Lale, and that's mostly kind of municipal needs, but most of the energy most of the water that's projected for this area is most likely to be for energy. It's all the other regions you'll see later on are actually just it's non-energy, it's the domestic sector and irrigation. In the model, I'll just get through this quickly. What drives the model, what drives energy demand? This is perhaps contentious, but we'll see. So we have that sector representation I was referring to earlier on, but we seem to, well, based on our projections on our studies from the existing system, we seem to think that commercial sector is most likely where most growth is going to happen in the tertiary sector, so manufacturing, hopefully also developing what they call the creative knowledge economy and moving away from an energy-intensive industrial base. What that means is basically just more electricity in terms of commercial space. And also the commerce, so the main drivers in our system would be the commercial tertiary sector and transport or liquid fuels. Yada, yada, yada. And okay, so quickly, what we do here is like, when you talk about modeling the future, what is it that we actually try and model in terms of water and energy? In particular, climate, right? So everyone's, climate change is it's in the public space. What it means in South Africa is how does it affect rainfall and water demand as well. So some of the modeling that's been done, for example, indicates that there are likely to be increased temperatures, and in terms of precipitation up to 2040, it's debatable. I mean, some areas in South Africa are likely to receive increased runoff, high elevation, but that's offset by the high demands as well. So, especially in agriculture, so in your lower lying areas, the arid regions, hotter temperatures means increased irrigation, and hotter urban areas means increased water demand. So even though like your catchments might be receiving more water, it's kind of offset by the increased demand for that water. So we've got environmental. There's talk about the new air emissions regulations that Eskom is required to adhere to, the FGDs, flue gas desulfurization. And although they're not quite compliant, it's also like the treatment of water for the coal mines as well. So a lot of the coal mines have excess water, and also it's not so much the excess water, it's also the mining activity itself which leads to AMD, because you're fracturing the bedrock and it's causing this chemical reaction which then produces this particular acidic leachate, and that kind of eventually finds its way into the wider aquatic system. The idea is to try and account for these externalities. We've done a rudimentary job on the coal, but not so much on potential shale. It still needs a bit of work. And these are just the kind of usual other energy-related modeling questions, like the discount rate is the cost of money to build these power plants. The cost of power plants themselves is quite contentious with the nuclear build as well, how expensive is nuclear going to be. And in the water energy nexus, we're kind of looking at demand in water, demand for energy and water in unison. So I've spoken to that in the sense what we don't have at the moment is a kind of harmonious marriage between the two. We've taken the Oricon water demands and we've kind of laid that on top of our growth assumptions. What we need to do at a later stage is kind of just look at more of the economic sectors, and then what we want to do is actually look at the bottom-up level of actually splitting up the industrial and domestic sectors and their particular water needs. So when you project growth for the economy, the water needs are then kind of automatic, it's built into the model, and then you can do much more sophisticated modeling with that. I'll speak to that in a moment. So I spoke about climate early on. You can see the kind of variation in projected water demand, or supply rather, or both actually. So you can see these are the regions I mentioned earlier on, and you can see how this is actually have interest. Where are we? Where's the berg? down there. So out of interest, there's a projected decrease in water supply for the bird, which is where we are at the moment. But most of the other parts of the country, you can see there's a slightly increase, but the statistical variation is so wide going into the future that it's hard to say really. But the idea is to plan for the future. So why cost water for energy supply? So what I did was initially was, what we did was, so we looked at our original system and we said, well, if we don't include water, how does the two differ? We'll see, like in the instance where we start building, and this is like, our reference code is basically unconstrained. It's kind of a business as usual, so coal is still king in that sense. So we build a lot of coal, and a lot of that coal, this section here, is basically wet cooled, because it's more efficient and it's cheaper, which is why they built wet cooled in the earlier period, when water wasn't like as big an issue as it is now. So because of the lower operating costs, the system tends to want to build lots of wet cooled, because the idea is to minimize your cost to society, so the electricity is cheaper in that sense. Also, we build a bit of solar thermal, which is also wet cooled. When you include all the stuff that I was talking about earlier on, we actually build this into the model. There's a kind of automatic shift to dry cooling, which is what, and this is, most of these plants get built up in Viterberg, I was referring to earlier, region A. So that because you're building these pipelines, you're basically transferring water from the south to the north. It makes it more, and it's expensive to do so, it makes it more economical to actually then switch to dry cooling, which is kind of what ESCOM is doing at the moment. So that's good. It's a kind of affirmation of that build policy, if you like. Doesn't really, in terms of the overall system, and this is somewhat contentious I suppose, it doesn't, in terms of overall emissions, CO2 emissions, there's only about a 1% change when you look at the, when you add water and without the water cost involved. There's the system cost, it's similar, it's about, as you'd expect, there's a 1% increase in system costs because these power plants are slightly more expensive. And your primary energy is mostly coal. It's about, there's a 1% reduction in that, but the saving in water is about 80%. It's about 80%. I want to say it's quite contentious because what we've done, as you've seen earlier, is we haven't modeled the entire country as yet. It's a kind of staged process. So we're only looking at inland fresh water supply, and we're not looking at the coastal areas where you also have generation plant, but we presume that most of these plants are actually running on seawater as well. So we're not quite linked them completely. We were hoping to do a biofuel study, getting here, my stuff again here, where we actually link up the coastal areas to the inland system and then see how that also affects the inland activity. So, some more pretty pictures. What this speaks of is the same graph there. This is just the water consumption that I was referring to earlier on. But you can see in terms of the actual energy production that we look at, so in a kind of default case, you can see the water intensity actually rising from the base case, which was, I think it's 1.35, which is called report, so we get a similar, was 1.35 there in a similar number. But we'll see this kind of declining trend in water intensity for electricity production when we switch to dry cool. The spike here, that's basically just saying that what happens here is that because we're building with BP and Kusili, and they're presumed to come in by 2020-ish, there's actually excess. So we have spare capacity in the system. So we actually then, what we tend to do is we kind of ramp down, or we underutilize our older, just the wet cool plants. We basically just taper down their production. But then we get to the point again where the system becomes constrained and we start ramping up again. It's kind of what we are, where we are at the moment, where our, these older plants are kind of running beyond, in excess to their capacity, which is why we're having load shedding at the moment due to deferred maintenance. So this is just really just a kind of confirmation of what I was saying earlier on, where you can see most of the demand, which is the orange, is actually coming from the non-energy sector, and that's really kind of causing the water stress in that sense. And so with irrigation and also domestic use as well. In the oil farms, where we've got those coal power plants, we're actually seeing like actual decrease. It's one of the only reasons there's a decrease in water demand because these plants are retiring and they're wet cooled, so they're quite water intensive. And so if these plants come offline, there's increased water availability in that region for other use. The only area where water goes up dramatically is in the Waterberg, and it's mostly energy because there's not much up there, but a lot of coal. So that's where all that's kind of the need for this particular for the water. Interestingly enough, if you look at the actual volumes I'll be speaking of here, when you look at the scale, that's 800 megacubic meters is like megaliters, so thousands of liters, millions of thousands of liters. Billion liters, that makes any sense. So interestingly enough, the volumes that we're actually talking about are quite small compared to the rest of the country. Like most of the waters requirements are in Gauteng and the Orange River. If you look at the different scale by a factor of 3, I think, 4. Whereas the Waterberg, you're only down about, you're down about there relative to the Orange. But in terms of cost, most of the expenditure, future expenditure, water supply that the GWS would need to look at is actually coming from, it's going to the Waterberg. So that's interesting. So, and the reason for this is, as I alluded to earlier, was it's building these pipelines to bring water from the south. So it's a fair distance to take water, and it's going to cost money. Now, what does that mean in terms of water price, or cost rather? So you can see, so this is just, well, what we've done here is add a number of, a portfolio of potential scenarios that we could see for South Africa in terms of energy supply, and how that would then impact the cost of producing water in that particular region. So because of the spatial disparities of water supply and demand, there's also spatial disparities in cost as well. So different users would see different costs. Most of the regions, you'll see there's an increase in costs, rising, especially so in the Waterberg. I mean, it makes sense if you're going to spend all that money to build infrastructure to send water up north. You're going to see an elevated cost as well in the future, which is kind of what you see here. These spikes are just as these different schemes kick in. So as water demand grows, you build a scheme, you build a scheme, you build a scheme. As these schemes get utilized to capacity, the average cost kind of declines. This is the Orange River. The pricing also varies likewise with scale. So even though the Waterberg was, in terms of sheer volumes, was like a fraction of the other regions, it's the pricing is kind of inverted. So for the little water that they're requiring, they're actually paying a lot. The cheapest waters in the Orange River, followed by Gauteng or the Vaal. When we say the cheapest water, I mean it might still actually impact agricultural users. So that's another one we can look at, because 20 cents per cubic meter, 20 cents per 1,000 liters doesn't sound like much, but we don't know what margins that agricultural activity occurs at. So if you had shale gas coming in and it pushes the price to near double, how does that impact agricultural users?
So just quickly, I can't quite see the scales, but
Yeah, sorry,
the Waterberg is like an order of magnitude higher in price than the other one.
Yeah, so sorry, that's 3 rands. And the Waterberg, if you're getting up to 2045, depending on your scenario, you're looking at a price of about 12 rand versus 2 rand 50, and this is like 50 cents in the future if it's shale. And in the Vaal, you're getting up to potentially 1 rand, depending on your scenarios.
Okay. And could you unpack the scenarios a little?
Yes, I was going to say there's a lot of information that's encapsulated in this. So, for example, we had our reference case, which was the business as usual projection, 3% GDP. We have a dry climate case, I was referring to. So what the dry climate case speaks to is just, we looked at the, you know, this graphs I showed you earlier, but the variation in just runoff. So that just kind of incorporates that information, although in the dry climate case, our, because of the integrated nature of our water supply system, in terms of supply, it doesn't really seem to impact water supply, but where the stress is coming from is the increased demands. So, I mean, that's kind of evident, for example, in the Vaal. I'm saying the Olifants, where this increase in water costs here is actually coming from the non-energy sectors. So there's increasing demand, and that's pushing up the cost of water. One of the interesting things I picked up was that in a dry climate case, oddly enough, there's actually like an earlier return. So in the dry climate case, when you've got predominantly non-energy use, so there's domestic sectors, that's just the domestic irrigation sectors in these two regions where the coal power plants sit, the existing coal power plants. What happens is, because the existing plants are wet cooled, there's pressure on these plants to retire earlier, and then it's actually causing a kind of earlier shift to the Waterberg into building new coal plants, which is interesting because what it does is it's somewhat ironic in the sense that you're taking the dry climate as in the water stress, you're actually shifting coal to a kind of arid region and you're pumping water up that way. So with the shale gas play, that's basically saying that we're actually looking at exploiting the shale gas availability, and what that impacts is there's a reduction in price in the Waterberg because there's less coal build. Obviously water, you expect the cost of water supply in the Orange River is going to escalate because that's where the actual activity occurs. It doesn't really make a difference to the existing power plants because they just kind of run business as usual. You just don't build any more coal power plants, that's all. And the other scenario we looked at was in terms of South Africa looking at meeting its becoming an international agent in climate change in terms of meeting its CO2 or its contribution to CO2 reductions. We looked at an emissions cap. So this is a 10 gigaton cumulative cap and a 14 gigaton. Now all that is just saying, well, we cap. So the long-term mitigation strategies plan, for example, came up with this peak plateau decline scenario where emissions for the country will peak. It was about 2030, plateau for about 2040, thereabouts.
2025 to 2035.
Yeah, and then decline. So these numbers just going to speak to that. This is just the lower ranges. So I think we budget 14 to 20 gigatons. I think we're about 5 minutes. So these are just speaking to that. All this is you build pipelines, and in a constrained case, when you restricting emissions, these pipelines don't get used because you basically you mothball your power plant. So it's what they call stranded assets. So they're underutilized. You spent a lot of money on an empty pipeline, essentially. These are just quickly, this is just the water intensities. I won't get into this too much. It's kind of a repeat of the earlier charts. The generation, the water requirements for generation. The reason why the carbon cap case is a bit higher is because we resort to wet cooled sea solar thermal. And because of the pricing of the water in the Orange River, 20 to 28 cents per cubic meter, it seems to make it more economical to build wet cooled as opposed to dry cooled plants. What that means is the cost of electricity, you could see it goes up to about, I think it's 100% if you look at the earlier carbon constraints. So this is the 10 gigatons, so much more severe, which means you start building, you start rolling out renewable energy in terms of CSP and PV much earlier in the time frame, 2020, as opposed to later in the time frame. And what that means is there's a hike in the price of electricity, where shale gas seems to provide the lower range. That's just your reference case there. So the shale gas being slightly, or your CCGTs, your gas plants are slightly cheaper, and also they use less water. So this is that there would be the water intensity for shale gas, and that's the cost of shale gas. I wanted to say quickly, And we don't have nickel coming into, by the way, because of cost. And we need to look at water quality as well, and if you include water quality up into the Waterberg, it actually reduces the amount of coal that you would build due to the, and this is based on the ESCOM study of looking at water transfers from the Crocodile River, which is actually of lesser quality than the existing supply system. So you have to treat that water for your dry cool plants. If you account for that cost, you build less. I think it's about 10 gigawatts, and then that 10 gigawatts actually gets then replaced by renewable energy build, like distributed PV and solar thermal, and a bit of gas as well on the coast. I think that's about it, really. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, what are the conclusions?
Okay, so the conclusions. So, what we found is by looking at these water energy, by modeling these two things together, the inter-resource dependencies, we actually find you get a better understanding of the sensitivity of the different linkages, for example. So we looked at the climate resilience. We found out the climate resilience of the integrated water supply network under that dry climate scenario, and how that impacts the different regions in terms of costs. So you'll see that, for example, that it shifts coal earlier to the, oddly enough, to the arid Waterberg because of the pressures in the Vaal. And also you could then look at, for example, it's not quite included just yet, but you can also say, well, if the price or the cost of water rather increases, how does that impact the other sectors? And then is there kind of a water transfer, or does agriculture activities change to different activities then? The model allows for that, and that's something that we're looking at. So if you're in the Orange River, there's a particular agricultural activity that occurs, if the shale gas is there and the cost of water goes up, will that kind of induce farmers to change farming practices, grow different crops?
Can I just ask you a question out of what you said earlier? Were you saying that shale gas is cheaper on water than
it's
coal-producing energy?
Yeah, it's I say that with some caveats though, because it's actually work that we need to refine. So what we've not included, and I need to get around to that, is looking at the treatment costs as well for shale, what they call return flows. So it's not embedded in the model as we have done for coal. So with our particular model, we've included water treatment costs. We added environmental compliance run for So we added the extra cost of treating water management for coal mines, which we've not gone around to that for doing that for shale gas as well. So the idea is you extract water, you frack, the return flows, what comes up. That water then gets treated as well at marginal cost. And then there's also a disposal cost as well. So we need to incorporate. But at the moment, because of the relative cost of water in the Vaal compared to the Orange River, it does seem to make shale very attractive in that sense, and also because the gas plants, they're much more economical to build too because of the cost, and in fact they use their water consumption is quite low as well. So it does seem economical, but we need to incorporate the additional cost of strengthening that transmission grid as well. Yeah.
Because one of the chief arguments against the shale gas is its use of water and pollution of water. So is it only because it's cheaper water? Yeah. Not because it's using less water?
It's a combination. So we've capped groundwater. So earlier I alluded to truck transport for water supply. That was in shale gas. So initially the water is quite expensive, and there's an actual deferment, if you like, of shale gas investment. So once you actually build a pipeline, and these costs need to be revised, so to speak. So I'm sort of very cautious about speaking about the results for shale gas because it's indicative only. So we need to look at the actual cost of building a pipeline. So we've got that needs to be revised. But once you build this particular pipeline and you limit groundwater usage, which is what we've done, in terms of overall volumes, yes, but you did see the escalation in price though for shale gas, right? In terms of water costs. Which is this one here. So when shale gas comes in at 2030 projected, that's really the cost of building that pipeline from the Harry Dam. Yeah, so I guess this is basically sums up what I was saying earlier on. You can see how it improves understanding of regional and national trade-offs as well when you try to look at these two resources together. So national in terms of our kind of energy supply portfolio, and regionally in terms of the kind of disparities that might occur in terms of costing water. And also it does speak, what we don't look at is also the kind of intervention measures I alluded to very early on. So where we break out these individual non-economic sectors, which is probably where most of the interesting stuff would occur. And then you can look at issues like water efficiency in industry and water conservation and demand side management as well for the domestic sector, and see how that then impacts the system. Because we had wanted to look at the biofuel sector as well, and then integrate the KwaZulu-Natal area as well. So thank you for allowing me to ramble like that.
Just want to say thank you to Fadiel for your presentation. We have brought you a little something to say thank you.
Shouldn't have, thanks.
Does anyone have any questions that they wish to ask on top of the ones that have already been asked? No problem. And yeah, all right. So we'll just take about 15 minutes worth of questions, and then there's some nice goodies and eats outside, and then you can have more conversations out there. Just before we start with the questions, I just want to say thank you, go on record as saying thank you to Action Team 15 also for helping us get this together. And thank you guys again for arriving. All right.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thanks, Fadiel. That was a great presentation. And if you knew me at all, then my question would be obvious. I'm just wanting to know, are you planning to look at biogas at all? Because my understanding of biogas is it's pretty much a zero water technique. So if one would think it would constitute a baseline or a standard.
No, it's a good point. When we get to, because we're working at such a high level, because of the model was built at that particular national policy scale, right? So in those power plants, we don't actually look at individual power plants just yet. So they're all kind of aggregated. So when we've got gas into the system, but not so much biogas. We do have another actual study, research project, where it's actually looking at the urban, what we call CLUES, but it's the water, food, energy nexus as well. So it's actually, this is like if you like, a national scale modeling, but we have another project, which is actually, we use Cape Town as a case study. So we did look at looking at the kind of the energy, water, food story there, and we looked at Philippi. So it's also it's a project that it's in its beginning phase. It's still incubating, and it's getting started. But it does what you're referring to is the biogas at the municipal level is very much applicable. I mean, I was eavesdropping in conversation early on, and we were talking about the wastewater municipalities. So that's quite it's an important source of alternative energy, especially when you look at the cost of wastewater treatment, the energy costs. I mean, half of the city's electricity bill, I think, we both recall from last time, went into wastewater treatment. So they could, and there has been a study, UCT, a guy from Doughnut, from Cambridge, for example, where they actually looked at waste for energy, and in particular also like liquid effluent. And it's not just wastewater treatment, not just sewage, but also the abattoirs as well. Apparently, there's quite a lot of potential in terms of the country. So there's another study that we're also looking at, and I should actually get Bryce to come and talk about that at some stage when they're further along down the line. It's actually looking at municipal energy planning. So it's a SAMSET project, a SAMSET project rather, and it's not Cape Town, it's Polokwane, it's Uganda, and it's the other one, Kenya as well, and it's looking at how municipalities can actually come up with these energy plans, and in that sense, biogas is very much applicable. Yeah.
And my second question was more like a comment around desalination, because places like Australia have started closing down desalination plants because of the coal. It's cheaper to manage to do demand side management of water than to actually increase supply by desalination.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how realistic an option actually.
Yeah,
is it just something engineers say? Because
we know when we looked at the numbers and we spoke to the guys at Oregon, they also like they probably just plucked it out, to have it there as a kind of your ultimate cost. So it's not. It's kind of what you do in the worst case with your back to the wall, if you like. You had no other alternative, which you pump water in. As the guy James Culls from Oregon was saying, it's not when you see desalination, it's not necessarily desalination in the report. What it might refer to as actually like reallocation, perhaps. So you wouldn't necessarily be pumping water all the way inland. You'd actually be, well, actually, it's a bit of a flip. You would be desalinating, but on the coastal areas. So for example, in the Eastern Cape, there's a fish Sundays transfer. So you wouldn't have a transfer. You'd have a water diversion. So you wouldn't necessarily transfer that water into PE. You divert it back into the Orange River, and then have PE. You have desal at PE in a kind of worst case scenario in that sense. But the issue then comes up: who pays for that? So it's also about a kind of equitable system. And yes, you're right in the sense that, I mean, kudos to the DWS. They have identified water demand management, DSM, as a alternative source of water, if you like. So, I said earlier that some of the loss rates in the municipalities, they go up to 80%. The figures I've seen, 70-80%. The average is about 36%. So, and that speaks to, I think, attitudes as well, right? We don't have it. We don't have we need to be educated as to value water in the way that it should be valued. Because from personal experience, I've been to a lot of public facilities, and you'll see running taps or dripping taps, and you come back the next week and it's like still dripping, leaking, and that's at cost to society, because you don't realize the kind of ramifications on your environment that we place when we develop these water supply systems. I spoke of the bit of fee Sonderend scheme, for example. We have these intricate engineering. It's a marvel in a sense, but at the same time, you've got this intricate engineering supply system at cost to the aquatic system. You add what was previously two completely separate aquatic systems, and you kind of actually, you basically just mixing the two. So we can have water. So whenever you turn your tap, you have to realize the consequences of doing so. Yeah.
You sort of a couple of questions about things, choices of the model, and it's more technical ones maybe.
Okay.
But one of the things you said is that you excluded nuclear because of cost, which I completely agree with, is a very rational choice. But I think
it wasn't excluded. It was in the model.
Oh, it was in the model.
I just didn't choose it.
You just didn't choose it.
Yeah. It was based on cost.
Okay.
Yeah. Chose CSP, but I chose CSP with storage.
I see. Okay. Because I think there's a lot of political mileage that can be had from explicitly putting that into the model, if you like.
Yeah.
Because there's a very strong push for nuclear despite cost, and the articulation is that the cost is rational, and DOE hasn't released those figures. So the more counterfactuals that are in the public arena, the less likely we are to misspend the money, I think. Is the point there.
Yeah. No, I should have been more explicit in that sense when I said excluded. I was referring to the results.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And then one of the other ones was when you were talking about the scenarios for the model, you looked at the emissions caps at 10 and 14 gigatons. So those, what period was that over?
So it's cumulative.
Since?
So it's a budget. So because of the disparities in the energy balances, we run from 2006. We feel it's kind of more
to 2050.
To 2050. So we actually, it's budgeted. So there's no strict cap in a sense, except to 2050. So the system needs to optimize.
You can optimize.
Yeah.
It's just that seems like that's a very low. I mean, that's the 14 is roughly in line with the lower limit of the PPD published. The 10th is even lower than that.
It's a quite, much more restricted. So we ran the 10 just to look at the implications on water and cost to the system. So you saw that spike in electricity pricing. I think it goes up to 20. But this is only looking at energy emissions. We're not looking at land use emissions as well. So
Okay, so it's a portion of...
Yeah, so you have to account in your budget.
And you're retaining roughly the portion at 60%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's in line with the IRP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fantastic. I just wanted to get a sense of that.
Yeah.
Since the LTMS, has anybody looked at or done scenarios on BAU emissions, direct CO2 emissions for South Africa in the future, and taking policies into...
Actually, funny that you mentioned that. So Bruno, who's the guy who helped me out with this project, he looked at a study, it was actually funded by UNEP, and actually looked at the uncertainties in the baseline for emissions, or baseline uncertainty study. So it's devoid of policies, but it looks at your BAU, economic trajectories in the face of uncertainties in pricing, technology costs, coal costs, and you get a very, it's hard for me to speak about because I'm not that cognizant of the project. I mean, the short answer is it has been looked at. If you want, I can, I think you seem familiar that you've been to the ERC. Yeah, so if you want, I can actually put you in contact with Bruno and the report.
Cool.
He's done some really cool modeling.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
We can go.
All right, are there any more questions? All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, can you then say thank you to Fadiel and officially close?